She understood that the law was meant to protect the vulnerable, yet her personal beliefs were now intertwined with the deep emotional stakes of the case. The fierce resolve that had characterized her career suddenly felt challenged by the knowledge that the man on trial was not just another defendant, but a member of the judge's family. As the trial continued, the air grew thick with tension and conflicting emotions. Samuel struggled to maintain his composure as he listened to testimonies that asserted Marcus's involvement in the crime. Each piece of evidence felt like a dagger, questioning the very essence of his morals. He wrestled with feelings of guilt and regret as he recalled missed opportunities and the harrowing circumstances that had led Marcus down a dark path. He remembered the laughter they once shared, their dreams of a future filled with possibility, and the years they had spent apart, consumed by their separate lives. Laura, determined to advocate for Marcus, found herself caught in a whirlwind of ethical dilemmas. Each time she stepped into the courtroom, she was aware of Samuel's piercing gaze, assessing and weighing the implications of every phone call, every strategy, and every plea she made on behalf of his brother. She admired Samuel's dedication to justice, yet she began to question the fairness of a system that would not bend for the very individuals it was designed to serve. The courtroom transformed into a theater of contradictions, where the pursuit of truth clashed violently with familial loyalty. The trial had uncovered not only the struggles of Marcus, but also the painful reality of systemic failure that affected countless lives in their community. Samuel became acutely aware that this case was part of a larger narrative, one steeped in socioeconomic disparities and the complexities of human nature. As the days passed, Samuel found solace in his reflections. He began to consider how he could redefine justice within the bounds of his role as a judge. Could he advocate for a more compassionate approach, one that recognized the humanity in everyone before the law? His heart ached for Marcus, who represented not just a brother in trouble, but also the countless victims of a flawed system. Ultimately, Samuel realized he could not separate the judicial process from the personal connection that had been reignited. With each passing day, he pondered on how the bond of brotherhood could reshape the way he viewed justice. Could mercy become an essential element in his duties? The moment of reckoning drew near. Samuel could feel the weight of the decision he was about to make pressing down on him, a blend of fear and hope intertwining in his heart. The memories of their childhood stood as a testament to the clear path of love and support that had existed between them in better days. Would he, as a judge, preserve that bond in the face of turmoil? With the culmination of the trial looming, Samuel sensed the communal unrest building outside the courtroom. Activists, advocates, and families affected by injustice rallied for change, demanding recognition of the underlying issues that created scenarios like Marcus's. The voice of the community echoed loudly, a reminder that there was more at stake than just one life. The gavel was not merely a tool of judgment. It was a chance to resonate with humanity, compassion, and forgiveness. In that moment, Samuel steeled himself for the inevitable. He would stand firm in his commitment to justice, acknowledging that true justice should heal rather than harm, uplift rather than destroy. As the trial reached its zenith, Samuel prepared to craft a verdict that transcended mere legalities. He realized that sometimes the most profound changes arise from recognizing and nurturing the ties that bind us. As he contemplated the future of his brother, the weight of kinship intertwined with his responsibilities as a judge, crafting a story that could redefine both their lives and the lives of others lost in the labyrinth of systemic inadequacies. Samuel's heart sank as he read the words, each sentence striking at his core. The accusations intensified the scrutiny he faced, turning the community's gaze more critical and less forgiving. He felt exposed, as if every decision he made was under a magnifying glass. The anticipation in the courtroom was thick with tension as day after day the trial unfolded. As the tumultuous weeks passed, Samuel's role was scrutinized not just in the courtroom but also outside of it, where the stakes became intimately personal. Friends who once stood by him began to withdraw, fearful of being cast aside by the community as well. The pressure mounted, and the lines between duty, justice, and familial loyalty blurred further with each passing day. Laura, who had been a source of strength during this turbulent time, felt the impact of the situation too. She faced her own challenges, with colleagues questioning her professional integrity for advocating so passionately for Marcus. Yet with every conversation they shared, Samuel was reminded of the importance of their mission. Their bond had grown, anchored by shared values and a deep commitment to truth. As the accusations escalated, Samuel realized that he had to confront not only the external challenges, but also the internal conflict raging within him. He sought clarity through reflection, dissecting the essence of his role as a judge. Was he meant to enforce the law rigidly or adapt it to uphold justice? The moral dilemma weighed heavily on him. In a moment of clarity, Samuel understood that his brother's case was about more than just one man's fight for freedom. It was about confronting a broken system. He began to see the trial as a pivotal moment, not just for Marcus but for justice itself. As the proceedings moved forward, he fortified his resolve to expose the systemic flaws that had brought them to this point. With each witness that took the stand, Samuel listened intently, absorbing their stories and viewing the trial through a broader lens. He began to champion the narratives of those affected by the same systems that Marcus had fallen victim to. By highlighting their experiences, he created a tapestry of understanding that painted a vivid picture of the realities faced by individuals trapped in a cycle of injustice. As weeks turned into months, Samuel's approach to the trial began to shift dramatically. He committed himself to on-the-ground conversations with community leaders, individuals impacted by the justice system, and advocates who understood the intricacies of systemic oppression. This initiative not only revitalized his purpose but also reinvigorated the community's engagement with the case. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The narrative surrounding Samuel shifted from one of bias to one of empathy and determination. Public sentiment started to change as people rallied around the idea that the legal system must evolve to recognize the complexities of human experience. Yet, with newfound support came new challenges. The prosecution, sensing Samuel's shift in strategy, ramped up their efforts, determined to secure a conviction. Samuel had to remain vigilant against tactics designed to undermine his integrity and portray him as someone influenced by friendship rather than justice. As the climax of the trial approached, it became clear that Samuel's battle was a microcosm of a larger struggle for reform within the justice system. With each passing day in court, the growing outcry for change echoed not only in the halls of justice but in the hearts of the spectators who filled the benches. In the final moments of the trial, as the jury began their deliberation, Samuel looked around the courtroom. He saw hopeful faces, those whose lives felt intertwined with this fight, and realized he was not just a judge in this moment. He was a part of a community, a movement pushing for change, a chance at justice that transcended one case. As he awaited the verdict, Samuel understood that regardless of the outcome, the fight for justice would continue. It would inspire others to challenge the status quo and advocate for a system that upheld dignity and humanity. Together with his community, he had ignited a movement, a testament to the power of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Samuel felt the sting of betrayal as he read the words. He had never anticipated that their alliance would become fodder for public speculation. The emotional toll weighed heavily on him, manifesting in sleepless nights and an ever-present sense of anxiety. Laura, too, felt the repercussions of their growing friendship. As the public defender, she was already walking a tightrope, fighting against a system that often saw defendants as expendable. Now, with the media's spotlight shining brightly upon them, she faced hostility from her peers. Accusations of favoritism and unprofessionalism followed her like a shadow. The pressure mounted, and the camaraderie they had built began to fray at the edges. Their conversations, once filled with passion and purpose, turned into tense exchanges fraught with unspoken fears. The emotional impact of the trial seeped into every aspect of Samuel's life. He found himself withdrawing from his family, the weight of his brother's fate and the mounting public scrutiny creating a chasm between him and his loved ones. His wife, Sarah, grew increasingly concerned as she watched the man she loved become a shell of his former self. "You're not the same, Samuel," she said one evening, her voice tinged with worry. "You're consumed by this case. It's tearing you apart." But Samuel felt cornered, torn between the love for his brother and the duty he held as a judge. The more Sarah pressed, the more he felt the need to shield her from the turmoil within. As the trial reached its zenith, a new obstacle emerged. A group of activists who had taken up Marcus's cause. They staged protests outside the courthouse, demanding justice not just for Marcus but for all those who had fallen victim to a flawed system. Their chants reverberated through the streets, and while Samuel appreciated their passion, he also felt the pressure of their expectations. They saw him as a potential champion, a man who could sway the scales of justice. But with every rally, the stakes grew higher, and Samuel found himself grappling with the realization that he might not be able to deliver the outcome they sought. Meanwhile, Judge Collins's concern deepened. He began to question whether Samuel was fit to preside over the case, fearing that the emotional turmoil would cloud his judgment. During a closed-door meeting, Collins confronted Samuel once more. "You need to consider stepping down, Samuel. This is too personal for you," he said, his voice laced with a mix of concern and disappointment. "Your brother's fate is not worth sacrificing your career." Samuel's heart sank. The thought of relinquishing his position felt like a betrayal to both his brother and the principles he had dedicated his life to uphold. As the trial continued, Marcus's defense team uncovered evidence of police misconduct during the investigation. A witness came forward, revealing that crucial evidence had been tampered with, raising questions about the integrity of the case against Marcus. The revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom, igniting a fierce debate between the prosecution and defense. Samuel felt the pressure mount as the implications of this new evidence weighed heavily on his shoulders. Could he truly deliver justice when the very foundation of the case was crumbling beneath him? In an unexpected turn, the prosecution's lead attorney, a relentless figure named Derek Lawson, began to personally target Samuel in his cross-examinations. Lawson's sharp tongue and keen insight into Samuel's internal struggles made each day in court feel like a battle of wills. "You're letting your personal feelings dictate your rulings, Judge Reynolds," Lawson would taunt, his words slicing through Samuel's resolve. The emotional toll was palpable. Samuel felt like he was standing on a precipice, with the ground shifting beneath him. With each passing day, Samuel's once clear convictions became muddied. The weight of his brother's potential conviction pressed heavily on his heart, and he found himself wrestling with the realization that he might not be able to save Marcus. In quiet moments, he contemplated the implications of failure, not just for his brother but for the community that looked to him for guidance. As Laura continued to fight passionately for Marcus, Samuel found himself at a crossroads. The more he learned about the systemic failures that had led to Marcus's plight, the more he felt the urge to challenge the status quo. But with that realization came fear. Fear of losing his job, fear of disappointing his family, fear of the community's backlash. Every decision felt like a high-stakes gamble, and Samuel's heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead. Late one night, after yet another grueling day in court, Samuel received an anonymous tip. It was a piece of information that could potentially exonerate Marcus, but it came with a catch. The informant, a former member of the gang Marcus had been associated with, insisted on remaining anonymous, fearing for his life. Samuel faced a gut-wrenching dilemma. Should he pursue this lead, risking backlash and potentially endangering the informant, or should he keep his head down and stick to the case as it stood? As he lay awake that night, Samuel's mind raced. He thought of his brother, of the years they had spent together, and of the love that had always bound them. He considered Laura's unwavering commitment to justice, her courage in the face of overwhelming odds. In that moment of clarity, he realized he had to take the risk. He had to pursue the truth no matter the cost. The very next day, Samuel approached Laura with the information he had received. He could see the spark of hope in her eyes, but it was tempered with caution. "This could change everything, Samuel, but we need to be careful. If the prosecution gets wind of this, it could jeopardize the entire case," she warned, her voice steady but laced with urgency. They spent hours strategizing, weighing the risks against the potential for justice. Together, they vowed to navigate the treacherous waters ahead, determined to uncover the truth and fight for Marcus's freedom. As they embarked on this new path, Samuel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The weight of his brother's fate no longer felt like a burden but a call to action. He was ready to challenge the system, ready to confront the biases and injustices that had plagued their lives. But as they delved deeper into the investigation, they soon discovered that the very forces protecting the status quo were more powerful and entrenched than they had imagined. Samuel's resolve would soon be tested in ways he could never have anticipated. The twists and turns of the trial were far from over, and as he prepared to face the mounting challenges, he knew that the journey ahead would demand every ounce of courage and conviction he possessed. The path to justice would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but Samuel was ready to fight, not just for his brother, but for the countless others who had been silenced by a system that too often favored the powerful over the vulnerable. In that commitment, he found strength, solidarity, and the promise of redemption. As Samuel and Laura delved deeper into the investigation surrounding Marcus's case, the stakes escalated dramatically when a key piece of evidence materialized: a video recording that had been withheld by the prosecution. The video captured the night of the crime, revealing a chaotic scene but also showing Marcus's innocence. It depicted him not as the perpetrator but as a bystander caught in the crossfire of a violent confrontation between rival gangs. Samuel's heart raced as he watched the footage, his mind racing with the implications of this newfound evidence. This transformative moment struck Samuel like lightning, igniting a fire within him that had been smoldering under the pressure of the trial. The weight of despair that had burdened him for weeks began to lift, replaced by a surge of determination. He realized that this evidence could shift the entire narrative of the case, and with that realization came a wave of hope. Yet, that hope was quickly tempered by the reality of the situation. The prosecution, led by Derek Lawson, was not likely to back down easily. Samuel understood that unveiling this information would set off a chain reaction that could threaten not only Marcus's case but also his own career. The emotional impact of this discovery was profound. Samuel felt a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. He was on the brink of potentially saving his brother but was acutely aware of the risks involved. The fear of repercussions loomed large. He could be accused of misconduct or worse, jeopardizing everything he had worked for. But the thought of Marcus spending years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit ignited a fierce resolve within him. This was more than just a case. It was about family, justice, and the moral obligation to do what was right. In the days that followed, Samuel found himself in a whirlwind of activity. He and Laura worked tirelessly, preparing for the possibility of introducing the footage as evidence. Their discussions became charged with energy, and for the first time in weeks, Samuel felt a sense of camaraderie with Laura that transcended their professional relationship. They were in this together, united by a common goal and a shared belief in justice. However, they also faced the reality that revealing the video would not come without consequences. Samuel could sense the tension brewing in the courtroom, the palpable anxiety that hung in the air like a storm cloud. As the trial resumed, he watched Derek Lawson with a sense of unease, knowing that the prosecutor would do everything in his power to discredit them and suppress the evidence. Samuel understood that the prosecution would likely resort to underhanded tactics to maintain their narrative. The moment came when Samuel had to make the decision to present the video. Standing before the courtroom, he felt a mix of adrenaline and fear coursing through him. The eyes of the community were upon him, and he could feel the weight of their expectations. The tension was thick, and the air felt electric as he turned to face the judge. With a steady voice, he announced that he would like to present new evidence that may significantly impact the case. As the video played, a hush fell over the courtroom. Samuel watched the faces of the jurors, the prosecution, and the spectators, all absorbing the implications of what they were witnessing. The footage spoke volumes, painting a vivid picture of the truth. Samuel's heart raced. He could see the shift in energy, the flicker of realization as the jurors began to understand the gravity of the situation. For a moment, he felt a glimmer of hope that their efforts might finally bear fruit. The aftermath of the video's revelation was explosive. Lawson reacted with fury, his composure shattered as he scrambled to regain control. The prosecution's case began to unravel, and Samuel could see the cracks forming in their narrative. But along with the triumph came new threats. Lawson, realizing he was losing ground, launched an all-out attack on Samuel's credibility, trying to paint him as a biased judge who was incapable of making fair rulings. In the days that followed, the emotional toll weighed heavily on Samuel. He found himself plagued by sleepless nights, haunted by the fear that he had put everything on the line for a fight that might not end in victory. He was no longer just a judge. He was a target, and the pressure mounted as the trial progressed. The community's division deepened, and the protests outside the courthouse grew louder, with activists demanding justice for Marcus while others called for Samuel's resignation. Through it all, Laura remained a steadfast ally, reminding Samuel of their shared purpose. Together, they navigated the backlash, strategizing their next moves and bolstering each other's resolve. It was during one of their late-night discussions that Samuel experienced a moment of reflection, a realization that transcended the immediate challenges before him. He understood that this trial was not just about his brother's fate. It was a reflection of a larger fight for justice, a chance to challenge a flawed system that had failed so many. As the trial reached its climax, Samuel felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He had spent so long wrestling with the duality of his role as a brother and a judge, but now he understood that these identities could coexist. He was not just fighting for Marcus, he was fighting for all those who had been wronged by the system. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to confront the challenges ahead, prepared to face the backlash and the risks, knowing that he was on the right side of justice. In that moment of resolve, Samuel knew that he would not falter. The emotional impact of the turning point had shifted his perspective entirely. No longer paralyzed by fear, he was fueled by a sense of duty and a commitment to stand up against injustice. He understood the implications of his actions, the broader fight for equity that lay beyond the courtroom walls. And as he prepared for the final days of the trial, he felt a sense of empowerment, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that he was not alone in this battle. As the trial approached its climax, Samuel felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The courtroom had transformed into a battleground, and he was acutely aware that one misstep could lead to disastrous consequences. Not just for Marcus, but for himself as well. The tension was palpable, and he could sense the anxiety rippling through the community outside the courthouse. Activists had gathered, their chants echoing in his ears, demanding justice for his brother, while others shouted for his resignation. Samuel stood at the center of this storm, grappling with the enormity of the moment. Emotionally, he was a whirlwind of conflicting feelings. The exhilaration of having potentially uncovered the truth was overshadowed by a gnawing dread that crept into his thoughts. What if the video wasn't enough? What if Lawson had a counterattack prepared that could dismantle everything he and Laura had worked for? Every night, Samuel found himself pacing the small confines of his office, haunted by the stakes of the case. He had come to realize that this was no longer just about the legal system, it was about the very fabric of justice itself. Laura, sensing his turmoil, had become a crucial ally during these final days. She was unwavering in her support, reminding him of their mission and the importance of standing firm against the tide of adversity. Together, they spent long hours strategizing, poring over every detail of the case, preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Lawson. Laura's unwavering confidence was infectious, igniting a spark within Samuel that he desperately needed. She pushed him to reflect on the reasons he had chosen this profession, the ideals of justice that had once inspired him, and the duty he owed to those who had been wronged. As they prepared for the next day's proceedings, Laura shared a vital piece of information that shifted his perspective. She had reached out to a local journalist, someone known for their fierce integrity and commitment to uncovering the truth. The journalist had agreed to cover the trial and to highlight the discrepancies in the prosecution's case, thereby amplifying their message to a broader audience. This unexpected alliance opened a door Samuel hadn't anticipated, a means to rally public support and shine a light on the injustices they were fighting against. The night before the pivotal court session, Samuel found himself deep in thought, reflecting on the lessons he had learned throughout this journey. The pressure of the impending confrontation weighed heavily, but within that weight lay a newfound strength. He recalled the moments of doubt he had faced, the fear that had nearly paralyzed him when he first took on the case. Yet now, those very failures had become stepping stones to his personal growth. He understood that confronting those fears head-on was necessary for his transformation. As dawn broke, Samuel prepared for the day ahead with a sense of determination. He dressed in his robes, each motion deliberate and filled with purpose. In that moment, he affirmed his commitment to justice, not just for Marcus, but for every person who had suffered under a flawed system. Samuel stepped into the courtroom with a renewed sense of clarity, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The atmosphere was electric as he entered, the spectators buzzing with anticipation. Samuel could feel the eyes of the community upon him, and he took a deep breath, grounding himself in the knowledge that he was not alone. He glanced at Laura, who offered him a reassuring nod, a silent promise that they were in this together. As the trial resumed, the tension reached a boiling point. Lawson, visibly rattled by the previous day's events, launched into a series of aggressive cross-examinations, attempting to discredit Samuel's motives and the integrity of the evidence they had presented. The prosecutor's voice rose, filled with indignation as he accused Samuel of bias, alleging that he had manipulated the legal process for personal gain. But Samuel stood firm, his resolve unshakable as he countered each accusation with calm precision. Then, in a surprising turn, the journalist Laura had arrived with a camera crew, ready to broadcast the proceedings live. The presence of media added a layer of intensity to the courtroom dynamics, capturing the attention of those outside and drawing in public support for Marcus. Samuel could feel the shift in momentum. The community was rallying behind them, their voices growing louder, amplifying the call for justice. Just as the tension reached its peak, the unexpected happened. A witness, someone who had been present on the night of the crime but had remained silent until now, stepped forward. With shaky hands, they approached the stand and recounted their version of events, corroborating the video evidence. The courtroom fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of this testimony, a powerful affirmation of Marcus's innocence. As the witness spoke, Samuel felt a surge of emotion welling within him. This was the moment they had been waiting for, a chance to turn the tide definitively. He watched Lawson's face pale, the realization dawning that his carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. It was a pivotal moment, one that Samuel had hoped for but had never dared to dream would come to pass. In that instant, he understood the interconnectedness of their struggles, how every individual voice contributed to the larger fight for justice. The unexpected witness had not only solidified their case but had also reminded Samuel of the power of community and solidarity. He had entered the trial as a brother torn between two worlds, but now he felt a sense of belonging to something greater than himself, a collective movement striving for change. As the courtroom buzzed with renewed energy, Samuel glanced at Laura, whose eyes sparkled with triumph. They had faced their fears, confronted the obstacles together, and now they stood on the precipice of victory. With a deep breath, he gathered his thoughts, steeling himself for the final stretch of the trial. The battle was far from over, but the pieces were falling into place. In that moment, Samuel found his voice, ready to deliver the closing arguments that would resonate not just within the confines of the courtroom, but throughout the community. He was prepared to remind everyone of the truth they had uncovered and the lives that hung in the balance. He understood that their fight was not just for Marcus but for every individual who had been silenced by a flawed system. And as he stepped forward, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, empowered by the lessons learned and the unexpected alliances forged along the way. Samuel stood before the jury, the weight of their collective gaze pressing down on him like an anvil. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, a charged atmosphere thick with expectation. He could feel the pulsing heartbeat of the community outside, their hopes and fears reflected in the eyes of those before him. This was it, the moment of truth. He took a deep breath, the air thick with tension, and began to speak. His voice trembled at first, but as he continued, a steady resolve washed over him. He reminded the jury of the evidence they had seen, the video that had sparked a firestorm of doubt about Marcus's guilt. He spoke passionately about the witness who had come forward, recounting the night of the incident with trembling honesty. Each word was carefully chosen, each sentence crafted to resonate with the juror's sense of justice. But then, just as he was gaining momentum, Lawson interjected, his voice slicing through the air. "Objection, Your Honor. The defense is attempting to manipulate the jury with rhetoric rather than facts." Lawson's tone dripped with disdain, his eyes narrowing as he glared at Samuel. Samuel felt a flicker of doubt creep in, a momentary flash of insecurity. Could Lawson's accusations sway the jury? He quickly shook off the thought, remembering Laura's unwavering support. She had reminded him that this trial was about more than just facts. It was about truth and justice. "Your Honor," Samuel replied, his voice steadying, "I am not here to manipulate anyone. I am here to present the truth as it stands. The evidence speaks for itself, and the witness's testimony corroborates that evidence. This is not just a question of legality. It is a question of morality." The judge nodded, allowing Samuel to continue. The tension in the room thickened as he pressed on. He recounted the systemic failures that had led to Marcus's wrongful arrest, the way fear had clouded judgment, and the chilling reality of a community torn apart by injustice. In the back of the courtroom, Samuel caught a glimpse of Marcus's mother, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The sight ignited a fire within him. This was not just about the law. It was about lives, families, and the heartache that came from a flawed system. Samuel felt every ounce of that pain, and he channeled it into his words. As he spoke, he saw Lawson's demeanor shift. The prosecutor, who had once seemed so confident, now appeared increasingly agitated. Samuel could sense the tide turning, the momentum shifting in their favor. He could almost hear the whispers of the community outside, their voices merging into a collective chant for justice. "Why should we believe this witness?" Lawson challenged, his voice rising. "What motive do they have to come forward now, after all this time? Because they care about the truth?" Samuel shot back, his voice ringing with conviction. "They care about the truth just as much as we do. They were afraid, just like so many others in this community, but they found the courage to speak up. That courage is what we need to uphold justice." The courtroom fell silent. Samuel knew he had struck a chord. He could feel the weight of the moment in the air, and he pressed on, recalling the lessons he had learned along the way. This was not just about winning a case. It was about standing up for what was right, about breaking the cycle of silence that had perpetuated injustice for far too long. He spoke of the importance of community, of the voices that had rallied behind Marcus, amplifying their call for justice. He emphasized that every person in that room had a role to play in ensuring that the truth prevailed. "We are stronger together, and it is our responsibility to lift each other up, to challenge the status quo, and to fight against the fear that seeks to silence us." With each word, he felt the energy in the room shift. The jurors were leaning forward, their expressions intent. He could see the flickers of realization in their eyes, the collective understanding that they were part of something larger than themselves. Then, as if drawn by an invisible force, Samuel turned to the jury, meeting their eyes one by one. "This is your moment. Do not let fear dictate your decision. Stand for what you believe in. Stand for Marcus. Stand for justice." In that moment, Samuel felt a surge of clarity wash over him. He had confronted his own doubts and fears, and now he was standing firm in his truth. He had learned that sometimes the greatest challenge was not an external opponent, but the internal struggle to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. As he stepped back, he glanced at Laura, who beamed with pride and encouragement. They had come so far together, and the bond they shared had not only fortified their resolve, but had also become a beacon of hope for the community. The courtroom remained hushed, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Samuel could feel the collective breath of the jurors, the tension palpable as they processed everything they had heard. Finally, the judge called for a recess, allowing the jury time to deliberate. Samuel walked back to where Laura waited, his heart pounding in his chest. "Do you think they understood?" he asked, anxiety creeping back in. Laura placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You spoke from the heart, Samuel." They felt that, regardless of the outcome, you stood for something meaningful today. But Samuel couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. The next few moments felt like an eternity as they awaited the jury's decision. He thought of Marcus, of the hope that had been reignited in him, and of the countless others who had suffered in silence. When the jury finally returned, a hush fell over the courtroom. Samuel's heart raced, and he held his breath, waiting for the foreperson to deliver their verdict. The tension was unbearable, the weight of the moment threatening to crush him. "Your Honor," the foreperson began, "we the jury find the defendant, Marcus Thompson, not guilty." A wave of emotions crashed over Samuel. Relief, joy, disbelief. The courtroom erupted into a chorus of cheers, and he felt a crushing embrace from Laura as they celebrated together. But even amid the chaos, he felt a profound connection to the community that had rallied behind Marcus, their voices melding into a powerful testament to resilience and hope. In that moment, Samuel knew that this verdict was not merely a victory for Marcus. It was a step toward healing for the entire community. The fight for justice would continue, but they had made a significant stride forward. As he looked around the room, he saw the faces of those who had supported them, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The trial had transformed him. He had faced his greatest challenges, the fear of failure, the weight of responsibility, and the battle against systemic injustice. He understood now that standing up for justice was not merely an act of defiance but a commitment to the ideals he held dear. As he embraced Laura, he whispered, "We did it," and in that moment, he felt a profound sense of clarity, a realization that their fight for justice had only just begun. But together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The courtroom erupted into a cacophony of cheers and applause, but Samuel stood momentarily frozen, his mind racing to catch up with reality. The verdict echoed in his ears, a declaration that felt surreal. He had fought so hard, poured every ounce of energy and passion into this case. And now, in the blink of an eye, everything had changed. Laura squeezed his hand tightly, her eyes sparkling with tears of joy. Samuel turned to her, and in that moment, the world around them faded. They had not only defended Marcus, they had challenged a system that had silenced so many. It was a victory, but as the noise of celebration washed over him, Samuel felt a weight settle on his chest. He was keenly aware that this was just one battle won in a larger war against injustice, a war that would require constant vigilance and effort. As the courtroom began to empty, Samuel locked eyes with Marcus, who was surrounded by family and friends, their faces glowing with relief and gratitude. Marcus's mother broke away from the crowd and rushed toward him, enveloping him in a fierce embrace. Samuel felt the warmth of her gratitude wrap around him, grounding him in the moment. He had helped give her son back to her, but the journey was far from over. Once outside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric. A crowd had gathered, their voices rising in a jubilant chorus of celebration. Samuel was swept into the throng, the energy of the community surging around him like a tidal wave. People were chanting Marcus's name, echoing the very sentiments he had expressed in the courtroom. This moment was not just a victory for an individual. It was a collective triumph for the community, a testament to their resilience and courage. But amid the celebration, Samuel felt a flicker of doubt. The fight for justice wouldn't end here, and he was acutely aware of the work that lay ahead. He had seen firsthand how quickly fear could silence voices and how easily justice could slip through the cracks. He had to ensure that this momentum didn't fade, that it transformed into something lasting. Over the next few days, the impact of the verdict rippled through the community. Samuel received calls from local leaders and activists, all eager to discuss how they could work together to address the systemic issues that had led to Marcus's wrongful arrest. They wanted to establish programs that would educate the community about their rights and initiatives that would create safer, more inclusive spaces. Samuel found himself invigorated, his passion reignited. This was his calling, and he was ready to embrace it. Reflecting on his journey, Samuel recognized the profound changes that had taken place within him. He had started as a young attorney, overwhelmed by the complexities of the legal system and the weight of expectations. But now he stood with a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that law was not merely a profession but a powerful tool for social change. He had learned the importance of listening to the community, of understanding their struggles and aspirations. As he drove home one evening, the sun setting in a vibrant blaze of color, Samuel thought about the lessons he had absorbed throughout this experience. He had learned that vulnerability was not a weakness but a strength, that standing up for justice sometimes meant standing alone, and that true empowerment came from lifting others alongside oneself. He felt a sense of responsibility to be a voice for the voiceless, a champion for those who had been wronged. Back at the office, the atmosphere was charged with a sense of purpose. Laura had started organizing community meetings where they could discuss legal rights and avenues for advocacy. Samuel joined her, excited to help shape the future of their work together. They were no longer just colleagues. They were partners in a mission, their bond deepening with every shared victory and setback. The ripple effects of the trial were felt beyond the courtroom. Marcus, now free, had become an advocate for criminal justice reform, using his story to illustrate the flaws in the system. He visited schools and community centers, sharing his experience and inspiring others to speak out against injustice. Samuel admired Marcus's courage and felt honored to have played a part in his journey. As weeks turned into months, Samuel continued to reflect on the events that had unfolded. He was no longer just an attorney. He was part of a larger movement. He learned to celebrate small victories, understanding that progress was often incremental. The community began to unite, forming coalitions that tackled various issues, from racial profiling to economic disparity. Samuel found profound fulfillment in being part of this change, realizing that each action, no matter how small, contributed to a collective awakening. In quiet moments, he often thought of the challenges that lay ahead. There would be setbacks, and the struggle against injustice was far from over. But he no longer felt daunted by the enormity of the task. Instead, he felt empowered. He had witnessed the power of community, the strength that comes from solidarity, and the undeniable truth that change was possible. As he looked toward the future, Samuel understood that his journey was only just beginning. He had found his voice, and he was committed to using it to empower others. He had learned that vulnerability could lead to powerful connections, and that true change required courage and perseverance. With Laura by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, determined to make a difference in the lives of others. The final reflection came as he stood on the steps of the courthouse one last time, looking out at the community that had rallied so passionately. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey he had taken. Every moment of doubt, every sleepless night spent preparing for trial, had led him to this point. He had grown in ways he never imagined possible, and now he was part of something larger than himself. Samuel knew that the fight for justice would continue, and he was prepared to lead the charge. With each step forward, he carried with him the stories of those he represented, the lessons he had learned, and the unwavering belief that together, they could change the world. The journey was ongoing, and he was ready to embrace it, knowing that every step taken in solidarity would light the path toward a more just future. As Samuel stood on the courthouse steps, a gentle breeze tousled his hair, carrying with it the echoes of triumph and unity that had surged through the community just days before. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow that enveloped him, reminiscent of the hope he now felt deep within. The battle for Marcus had been a defining moment, not just for the young man who had regained his freedom, but for Samuel himself. He reflected on the journey that had led him here, the sleepless nights, the moments of self-doubt, the fierce debates in the courtroom, and the collaborative efforts that had ignited a movement for change. Each experience had shaped him, instilling a profound understanding of the complexities of justice and the power of community. He had learned that triumph was not simply about winning a case. It was about standing firm in the face of adversity and using one's voice to uplift others. Now, as he looked out at the crowd that had gathered to celebrate, he felt a surge of gratitude for those who had become part of his journey. Laura stood beside him, her presence a reminder of the bond they had forged through their shared mission. Their collaboration had evolved into a partnership built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared vision for a more just world. Samuel's eyes landed on Marcus, who was now actively engaging with the community, sharing his story and advocating for reform. The transformation he had witnessed in Marcus filled him with admiration. The young man had emerged from the shadows of his wrongful conviction, not as a victim, but as a beacon of hope for others who had faced similar injustices. Samuel realized that this was the ripple effect of their collective efforts, a movement that extended beyond a single verdict, one that had the power to inspire change in countless lives. Yet, as the night deepened, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that their work was far from over. The fight for justice was an ongoing struggle, one that demanded vigilance and resilience. He understood that while they had achieved a significant victory, the system still held many who were marginalized and silenced. With this realization came a renewed determination to push forward, to ensure that their voices would not be drowned out by the cacophony of injustice. In the days that followed, Samuel and Laura organized community workshops, inviting residents to share their stories and discuss the issues that affected them. They focused on educating individuals about their rights, fostering a sense of empowerment and solidarity. Each meeting became an opportunity for healing and growth, as participants learned to navigate the complexities of the legal system together. Samuel felt invigorated by their stories, their struggles, and their resilience. As he listened to the community share their experiences, he also reflected on his own growth. He had come to understand that true empowerment lay not in speaking for others, but in amplifying their voices. He was no longer just an attorney. He was a facilitator of change, a connector of people and ideas. The lessons he had learned from Marcus's case now served as a foundation for his work moving forward. One evening, after a particularly moving workshop, Samuel found himself sitting alone in his office, the weight of the day's discussions heavy on his heart. He thought about the individuals who had shared their stories with such vulnerability, their struggles etched into every word. They had opened up about their fears, their hopes, and the injustices they faced daily. Samuel felt a profound sense of responsibility to honor their trust, to ensure that their stories were not merely heard but acted upon. It was then that he decided to take a bold step. Inspired by the community's resilience, he initiated a campaign focused on advocating for systemic reform. Samuel reached out to local leaders, lawmakers, and activists, creating a coalition that would not only raise awareness but also push for legislative changes. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he was ready to embrace them, fueled by the collective strength of those who stood with him. Months passed, and the coalition's efforts began to bear fruit. They organized rallies, held town hall meetings, and worked tirelessly to draft proposals aimed at reforming the injustices faced by their community. Samuel felt a sense of exhilaration with each small victory, each step toward change. He had become part of a larger narrative, one that transcended individual experiences and spoke to the heart of societal transformation. As he continued to advocate for justice, Samuel also took time to reflect on the personal growth he had undergone. He had learned to embrace vulnerability, to acknowledge that he didn't have all the answers, and that it was okay to lean on others for support. He had forged connections that deepened his understanding of humanity, and in doing so, he had discovered the true essence of solidarity. One evening, as he and Laura walked through the community after a successful rally, they paused to take in the vibrant atmosphere around them. The streets were alive with laughter, music, and the sound of voices united in purpose. Samuel felt a sense of belonging wash over him. He was part of something greater than himself, a movement that had the power to inspire generations. But amid the joy, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that there were still battles to be fought. He had seen firsthand the impact of systemic injustice, and he understood that the fight for a just society would require relentless effort. With Laura by his side, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that they were stronger together. As they continued to walk, they encountered a group of young people, eager to share their ideas for future initiatives. Samuel listened intently, his heart swelling with pride as he realized that the next generation was ready to take up the mantle. They were inspired by the work that had been done and were eager to contribute their voices to the cause. In that moment, Samuel felt a surge of hope. The journey he had embarked upon had not only changed his life but had also sparked a fire within others. He had witnessed the power of community, the strength that comes from standing together, and the undeniable truth that change was possible when individuals united for a common purpose. As they parted ways with the young advocates, Samuel turned to Laura, a sense of determination etched on his face. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice steady. "We have a responsibility to keep pushing forward, to ensure that the voices of those who have been silenced are heard." Laura nodded, her eyes shining with conviction. "Together, we can create a future that reflects the values we believe in," she replied. "We can break down the barriers that have kept people from experiencing true justice." With renewed energy, they made their way back to the office, ready to continue their work. Samuel understood that while the road ahead would be challenging, it was also filled with possibilities. He felt a profound sense of purpose, one that would guide him as he moved forward in his journey. In the quiet of the night, as he prepared for the next day's challenges, Samuel took a moment to reflect on the lessons he had learned. He had discovered that every act of courage, no matter how small, contributed to the larger tapestry of change. He had learned that vulnerability was a strength, that standing up for what was right sometimes meant standing alone, but most importantly, he had learned that true empowerment came from lifting others alongside oneself. As he closed his eyes, a sense of peace washed over him. He envisioned a future where justice prevailed, where the voices of the marginalized were amplified, and where the community stood united against injustice. It was a vision that inspired him, one that would fuel his passion and commitment to the cause. Samuel knew that the fight for justice was far from over, but he was prepared to lead the charge, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. With courage in his heart and a community by his side, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, determined to make a lasting impact in the lives of others. In that moment of quiet reflection, Samuel understood that every step taken in solidarity would light the path toward a more just future. It was a journey he was honored to be part of, one that would continue to shape him and inspire others for years to come. And as he prepared to step into a new day, he carried with him the stories of those he represented, the lessons he had learned, and the unwavering belief that together, they could change the world. As the final rays of sunlight disappeared over the horizon, Samuel felt a renewed sense of hope. He had walked through the fire of adversity, emerged with a deeper understanding of justice, and was now ready to forge ahead, ready to embrace the possibilities that awaited him.